My beloved, pause for a moment before you decide to scroll, because what I am about to reveal is not comfort, not motivation, not another pleasant message you forget after 5 minutes. This is the reason certain doors slam shut in your face without warning. The reason people you gave your soul to suddenly became strangers. The reason your life felt like it was falling apart precisely when you were trying your hardest to hold it together. And if you truly listen, you will realize this was never destruction. It was exposure. It was preparation. It was the moment everything false in your life was forced to collapse so that what is real could finally stand. Because this season you are entering is not a restart. It is not a second chance. It is not you trying again. It is your arrival into the life that was always reserved for you. The life you could not step into until you stopped shrinking yourself to survive places you were never meant to stay. And I need you to hear this with your whole being now. Because for too long you blamed yourself for endings that were orchestrated to save you. You questioned your worth when relationships ended. You replayed conversations, wondering what you should have done differently. You wondered why you had to struggle so hard when others seemed to move forward effortlessly. And in your quiet moments, you asked why you had to lose things you prayed so hard to keep. But listen closely now. Nothing left you because you were lacking. Nothing faded because you were insufficient. Nothing was taken to punish you. It was removed because it could not go where you are going, because it required a smaller version of you to survive, and you were never created to live small. I watched you adapt yourself to be accepted, watched you soften your truth so others would stay comfortable, watched you turn your strength into silence and your honesty into restraint, watched you convince yourself that being less visible was safer than being fully seen, and you did it because you wanted connection, because you wanted to belong, because you believed that love required compromise of the self, and I understood your heart. But I could not allow you to disappear behind the version of yourself you created to be tolerated. So I allowed pressure, discomfort, loss, and exposure to strip away the mask you learned to wear. Not to shame you, not to hurt you, but to return you to the person you were before the world taught you to hide. Because deep within you is a self that existed before fear, before rejection, before disappointment, a self that is honest, brave, luminous, and deeply aligned with truth. And that self could not emerge while you were performing, pretending, or proving your worth through exhaustion. So you felt things slipping, felt stability dissolving, felt like you were losing ground, when in reality you were being released from roles you were never meant to carry for a lifetime. You thought you were falling behind, but you were being pulled forward out of a life built on expectations that were never yours. You mistook survival for purpose and validation for love, and that is why certain achievements felt hollow even when others applauded you. That is why success never quite healed the ache inside you, because you were being seen for what you produced, not for who you are, and I could not allow you to keep building your identity on performance. So I closed paths that only rewarded your output. I removed connections that only valued your usefulness. I ended seasons that required you to abandon your truth to maintain peace. And yes, it hurt because endings always do, but it hurt because you were shedding skin, not because you were being destroyed, and you must understand this now. What you call loss was alignment. What you call rejection was protection. What you call delay was preparation. Because the life now approaching you cannot be sustained by someone who is pretending. It demands wholeness. It requires presence. It needs you rooted in who you truly are, not who you learned to be to avoid being abandoned. And this is why you were forced into spaces where your defenses no longer worked, where your strength could no longer be performative, where your honesty could no longer be hidden, where you had to face yourself without the approval of others to lean on. And it felt unbearable at times. You questioned everything, even your faith, even your direction, even your value. But every moment of discomfort was carving out space inside you for something far more stable than validation. Self-knowing, because once you know who you are, you stop begging to be chosen by people who cannot see you. Once you are rooted in truth, you stop negotiating your worth for temporary belonging. And now you are beginning to feel it. The quiet shift, the strange calm, the clarity that arrives without explanation, the sense that you no longer need to chase what once consumed you. This is how you know you are not starting over. You are arriving because the opportunities now aligning with you do not require you to contort yourself. They do not demand you abandon your values. They do not trigger the old anxiety of not being enough. They fit you. They recognize you. They meet you where you are whole, and the peace you feel is not excitement. It is confirmation that you are no longer living in reaction, but in alignment. And this is why what is coming will not feel chaotic or rushed. It will feel steady, grounded, unmistakably right, because it is built on truth rather than fear. And understand this deeply, I did not withhold things to test you. I withheld them so you could carry them with wisdom, because if you had received them earlier, you might have used them to prove yourself, to escape your wounds, to fill the emptiness you were still carrying. But now you will hold them as responsibility, not reward. You will steward them with clarity, not desperation. And that is why your past suffering was not meaningless. It refined you, it stripped illusions, it taught you discernment. It showed you the difference between attention and connection, between intensity and intimacy, between attachment and alignment. And now when things return to you, or when new things arrive, you will recognize them not by how loudly they excite you, but by how deeply they calm you. Because what is meant for you does not create anxiety, it creates grounding. And I know you still carry memories that ache, moments you replay, people you miss, opportunities you wonder about. And sometimes you still ask why those things had to end when your intentions were pure. But hear this clearly now. They ended because they could not meet the version of you that was emerging, because they were tied to an identity you were outgrowing, because they would have required you to keep dimming yourself to stay connected. And that price was too high, so I cleared the path. Not because those things were evil, but because they were incomplete, temporary, unable to hold the weight of your future. And yes, you felt abandoned at times. You felt unseen. You felt like the ground disappeared beneath you. But I never left. I was guiding you through the narrowing, so you could walk into expansion without carrying what would break you later. And now you are beginning to see the pattern. How every ending brought you closer to yourself. How every release made you lighter. How every disappointment sharpened your vision. And soon you will look back and realize that nothing essential was ever taken from you. Only what was borrowed for a season. Because what is truly yours cannot be lost. It can only be delayed until you are ready to receive it without destroying yourself. And this is where you are now. Ready, not perfect, not finished, but rooted, aware, present. And this is why the connections forming now feel different. They see you, not your performance. They support your growth, not your compliance. They do not ask you to disappear to be loved, and the work unfolding before you does not drain you. It activates you because it is aligned with your nature, not your wounds. And the peace settling in you is not passive. It is powerful. It is the kind of peace that allows you to stand firm without explaining yourself, to walk away without guilt, to choose yourself without fear. And this is the shift. The moment where you stop living as someone who is trying to earn their place and start living as someone who knows they belong. And do not be surprised if others do not understand this change. If they question you, if they misunderstand your boundaries, because they knew the version of you who was available, accommodating, always adjusting. And that version no longer exists, not because you became cold, but because you became whole. And wholeness does not seek permission. It simply exists, and through your existence now, others will find clarity, not because you preach, but because you embody truth. Your calm will speak louder than your explanations. Your presence will offer safety to those who are still fragmenting themselves to survive. And you are prepared for this, not just for yourself, but so you could hold space for others without losing yourself, so you could guide without controlling, support without rescuing, love without abandoning your truth. And this is why your journey was intense, why your lessons were deep, why your losses felt heavy, because you were being shaped into someone who could carry influence without ego, connection without attachment, purpose without pressure. And now the life unfolding before you is not fragile. It is stable. It is rooted. It will not collapse at the first sign of challenge, because it is built on who you are, not what you can maintain. And as you step forward, you will notice how effort turns into flow, how clarity replaces confusion, how decisions become simpler, how your body relaxes, how your mind quiets. Because alignment removes resistance, and you will no longer feel the need to chase what once ran from you. Because what is meant for you moves toward you naturally, drawn by resonance, not force. And if you ever feel tempted to return to old patterns, to old versions of yourself, pause and remember how far you have come. Remember the peace you now hold. Remember the clarity you earned through release, and trust that you are not missing out. You are being preserved because the life you are now living is not built on urgency. It is built on truth, and truth endures. This is not a fleeting high. It is a stable ground, a new way of being. And as each day unfolds, you will discover more of yourself. Not through striving, but through presence. Not through proving, but through allowing. And there is no rush, no deadline, no comparison, because your worth is no longer measured by outcomes. It is anchored in being. And I need you to understand this fully now. Your tears were never wasted. Your questions were never ignored. Your suffering was never pointless. Every moment was shaping you for this arrival. And now as you breathe, as you stand, as you move forward, know this with certainty. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are exactly where you need to be, stepping into a life that does not require you to disappear. And this time, what is given to you will last. It will grow, it will deepen, it will flourish because it is built on truth. And if these words resonate, if something inside you feels seen, understand that this message reached you because you were ready to receive it. And if you choose to share it, you become part of something greater, a quiet movement of truth reminding others that loss is not always loss, that endings are often entrances, and that becoming whole is the greatest success of all. And if you feel called to support this message so it can reach those who need it most, you know where to find the way. Because we continue only through those who believe in spreading truth. And as you move forward now, move with calm confidence, knowing you are deeply valued, fully prepared, and exactly aligned with the life that has been waiting for you all along. All along. And now as you stand at this invisible threshold, breathing in a future that still feels unreal, I need you to stay with me a little longer, because the next truth is the one most people never hear, the one that changes everything once it finally lands inside you. And that truth is this: the reason you felt so exhausted for so long was never because you were weak. It was because you were carrying identities, expectations, emotional weights, and unfinished stories that were never meant to be yours to hold forever. And you carried them anyway because you loved deeply, because you hoped honestly, because you believed that endurance alone could turn misalignment into destiny. And so you stayed longer than you should have, tried harder than was required, explained yourself more than was necessary. And every time you felt that quiet inner voice asking you to stop, to rest, to let go, you silenced it with logic, responsibility, loyalty, or fear, telling yourself that leaving would mean failure, that releasing would mean giving up, that choosing yourself would mean hurting others. And that belief kept you trapped far longer than any external circumstance ever did. But understand this now with absolute clarity. You were never meant to sacrifice your truth to preserve a situation that was quietly draining your life force. You were never meant to remain loyal to environments that required your self-erasure as the price of belonging. And the exhaustion you felt was not a flaw in you. It was your soul protesting a life that no longer fit. Because when you live out of alignment, even good things become heavy. Even success feels empty. Even love feels conditional. And that is why rest never truly restored you. Vacations never healed you. Praise never satisfied you. Because what you needed was not escape. It was realignment, and realignment almost always begins with collapse. Because the structures built on compromise cannot survive truth. So when things began to fall apart, when plans unraveled, when people changed, when certainty vanished, it felt like punishment, but it was actually mercy, because something inside you was finally being honored. Something deeper than obligation, deeper than expectation, deeper than the story you were told about who you had to be worthy. And I know there were moments when you questioned your intuition, When you wondered if you were imagining the discomfort, if you were being too sensitive, too demanding, too idealistic. And so you tried to adjust yourself again, tried to lower your needs, tried to accept less than your heart quietly asked for. But every attempt to shrink brought more unrest, more anxiety, more internal conflict, because your spirit was no longer willing to negotiate its own existence. And this is where the real transformation began. Not when things improved, but when you stopped betraying yourself to keep them intact. And that choice, even if you didn't name it at the time, was the moment you crossed a line you can never uncross. The line where self-awareness replaces self-abandonment, where discernment replaces attachment, where truth replaces comfort. And from that point forward, nothing false can stay for long, because you are no longer asleep. And awakened people cannot unknow what they know. They cannot return to pretending. They cannot unsee misalignment. And that is why after a certain point, things didn't just end, they collapsed quickly, suddenly, sometimes painfully. Because once you stop feeding what isn't real, it starves. Once you stop performing, the audience disappears. Once you stop chasing validation, empty connections fall away. And that can feel terrifying when you don't yet see what is replacing it, because there is always a gap between what you release and what arrives. A sacred pause where the old is gone and the new has not yet fully formed. And most people turn back during that pause. They panic, they grasp for familiarity, they mistake emptiness for failure. But you didn't, even when it hurt, even when you doubted, even when you cried alone wondering if you had ruined everything. Something in you stayed, something in you trusted, something in you refused to go back to a life that required constant self-denial. And that quiet courage is the reason you are here now. Because the pause was not emptiness, it was incubation. It was the space where your nervous system learned safety without chaos, where your heart learned presence without attachment, where your identity learned stability without approval. And this is why you now feel different even before anything external has fully changed. Why your reactions are calmer, why your boundaries are clearer, why your tolerance for nonsense is lower. Because your system has recalibrated. You are no longer regulated by survival. You are regulated by truth, and that changes everything. Because now when opportunities appear, you don't ask, will this choose me? You ask, does this honor me? Now when people approach you, you don't ask, how can I keep them? You ask, can I be myself here? Now when challenges arise, you don't collapse into self-blame. You observe, you respond, you choose, and this shift may feel subtle, but it is profound because it means you are no longer living from wounds. You are living from wisdom, and wisdom attracts a very different life. A life that doesn't need to be forced, defended, or constantly fixed. And this is where many people misunderstand what is happening to you now. They think you are becoming distant, less emotional, less available, when in reality, you are becoming more present, more authentic, more grounded. But presence without desperation can feel threatening to those who are used to control. Authenticity without explanation can feel cold to those who rely on performance. And groundedness without justification can feel arrogant to those who still seek permission. So let them misunderstand. Let them project. Let them interpret your piece however they need to, because your job is no longer to be understood, it is to be aligned. And alignment will bring you everything you used to chase, but without the cost, without the anxiety, without the constant proving. And you will notice this especially in the way your relationships change, because the connections entering your life now do not require you to audition. They recognize you immediately. They don't need convincing. They don't need constant reassurance. They don't need you to dim your light or soften your truth. They meet you where you are and rise to that level naturally. And this can feel unfamiliar at first because you are used to intensity, used to inconsistency, used to earning closeness through effort. But healthy connection feels calm. It feels steady. It feels safe. And your nervous system might initially confuse that with boredom. But stay, breathe. Allow yourself to experience connection without chaos. Because this is where real intimacy lives. And the same is true for your purpose. The work you are moving toward now is not about hustle, not about overextension, not about sacrificing your well-being to be seen. It is about resonance, about contribution, about expression. And when you operate from alignment, your energy becomes magnetic.